All right, everybody should now be seeing my my screen okay here. And I am recording today's session for anybody that can't make it, Claire. They can join us later.
Great.
Okay, so we've had a few technical challenges here, but I just want to get started. And if everybody could just post in the chat where they're connecting from, that could be the city and state, or if you want to include the nonprofit or organization you're representing, that would be great. Whatever you're comfortable sharing here in our group. But we'd love to hear in the chat if everybody can hear us. Okay, just post where you're connecting from, and that will be a kind of a tech check, so to speak, to make sure we're good to go. And I am on my other screen here, Claire, setting a timer because I don't want to just ramble on forever. These people have work to do, I think. What do you think?
I think probably.
Probably so.
We're going to try to help them do their work even better.
That's right. Well, that's exactly right. So it looks like we have Michigan. Let's see. We have Texas. I'm from Plano originally, so I'm loving my Texas brothers and sisters. We've got Rockland, California, Montana, Fort Worth.
Rockland, California. I bet it's smoky there.
Yeah, definitely. You got Colorado. Let's see, where else? Indiana. Wow, got quite a New Hampshire. There you go. San Francisco, North Carolina. Worcester. Ashley, I know how to say Worcester. Isn't that impressive? Most people say Worcester. I'll spend some time in Acton, Littleton area, so I've got the little Yankee in me yet. All right, well, let's get started with today's session, and I'm going to just ask a quick poll here. Now, you would think that I am an expert in running these webinars, based on these little challenges we've had, Claire, but I'm going to try something here that's kind of exciting, and I'm going to launch a poll and see if this works for everybody. So the first question I'm asking folks is, if you're currently using text message, we'll leave it up for a little while, but I'd just like to know how you're currently using text messaging. We will leave it up for a bit if you're using it at all. And then I do have a section here just for your biggest challenge, whether that be acquiring new donors, donor engagement, donor attention. And I will share the results here in a minute once everybody finishes. We'll give it another couple of seconds. I've got about 21 out of 52 responses. So we'll see how, as an audience, we're shaping up, Claire. And that'll help us guide the conversation moving forward. So one more second here. And I think we're good. All right. So here's what we have. I'm going to share the results with everybody. Looks like we have, can you see the results on your end, Claire? I'm not sure.
I can.
Okay, perfect. So it looks like about 54%. So by far, most people are not currently using text on a regular basis, but there is some that are using it to around text to donate, which is about what we find to be true. So that's good to know that. And then look what everybody's top challenges are. Acquiring new donors.
It's fascinating to me. I'm kind of wondering, acquiring is the biggest, but for the donor engagement, donor retention, is it not a challenge because it's not a priority? Or are you doing a good job retaining donors?
That's awesome. Well, I tell you what we can do at the end of this session here, we can ask that question again in more of a priority flip and see how people maybe answer it after they've been indoctrinated with some of your thinking. What do you think about that?
Okay.
That's good. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing here and move on to our time together. On the phone with you today, it's Claire. Claire, I'll let you introduce yourself because you're going to do a much better job than I could. So take it away.
Oh, okay. So I have my own business, Clarification. Before that, I worked for 30 years in the trenches as a director of development and marketing. So I know the challenges that you face daily. I've worked for different organizations of different sizes, different causes. And a lot of what we're going to cover today holds true no matter your shape or size. And 10 years ago, I went out and started my own business. I have Clarification School, which basically is very little money for me to share everything I know, everything I learn, because that's my way to kind of help the world. We got a lot of problems, and you guys are really trying to make our world a better place, and I want to be helpful to you. So that's why James and I are here today.
I love it. And Claire, I've got a chance to interview her on my podcast recently. So if you hadn't got a chance to check that out, I would recommend you do that. You can hear her full origin story and kind of her background, what inspires her to think the way she does. I'm James Martin, and I have to throw a picture of my family up there so that I get at least a little bit more credit. But I'm a tech entrepreneur. I've served on a number of nonprofit boards, built a couple of companies, sold and done some investing. But my latest endeavor, Rally Corp, is my attempt really to solve the challenge that I've had just acquiring and engaging donors on a repeatable and sustainable method. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here. And I do have a slide here with a little bit more about who we are in case anybody wants access to the slide after the fact. I'm glad to send that out to you. I won't leave the text up there long, but you can learn a little bit more about our background. So let's get started with today's agenda, shall we, Claire? And
Sure.
I'll bounce it back to you in just a minute, but just quick, set the stage. We're going to talk about common challenges and some background that we face. This is what Claire's doing here, because I've served on a board and I've been in a light development role in the sense that I've had to help raise money as being on the board and being engaged, of course, and believing in the cause. And I was helpful to start a nonprofit, a very small one, just kind of from the ground up. So I've got a taste of compliance and all that fun things. We stood up a new entity, but I don't nearly have the experience that Claire has. So she's here to really shed some light on the challenges that you're facing and what she's experiencing firsthand. And then I'm, as I said, a technologist. So Claire, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I'm going to try my best not to make it just about text messaging, but I do want to show text messaging and what we're doing there and what I would recommend folks do, whether they use Rally or not, to engage donors. And of course, I've got some helpful resources and a giveaway at the very end. So on to the challenges. Let's talk a bit about some of the common challenges. When it comes to capturing people's attention, I'm going to state the obvious. It's not easy. Whether you're using paid ads, I'm sure there's a segment of folks on the call today that some may use like paid ads through Google. I know there's a Google ad grant. There's a company here in San Diego we work with closely that does that. But people are seeing lots of ads. I mean, 5,000 ads a day actually is an older study now of how many ads we're seeing. And just with the rising cost of donor to get to our donors through all the different things in their inbox and the things that they see on social media, it's just challenging to get them to take that initial step. And obviously we're looking to increase donor lifetime value. And Claire, you can speak a little bit to that. But some of the aspects around why donor engagement is so important, I know it's something that you and I talked about coming into this webinar. But what are your experiences with some of either some of these challenges or around the power of donor engagement?
Well, I guess I would ask you to just think about what's the number one way that you communicate with your friends now. And my guess is it's not email. And yet in our work, we tend to rely very heavily on email. And it's not that it's a bad choice, it's a great choice, but it's good to kind of think very strategically and carefully before you send out any kind of messaging to think, what is the best way to communicate this particular information with this particular audience or person?
Yeah.
And I think text messaging is just one strategy that most nonprofits have not really robustly adopted yet. But I like to think about it as one more strategy as a way to sort of show your love.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons that I recommend reframing your approach to quote unquote what we call development, because development is just an invented term. It really means marketing. But when we invented the term development, it was at a time that nonprofits didn't want anything to do with business. So they didn't want to say marketing. Yeah. But it really is an integration of fundraising and marketing. And when you think about fundraising, you think about money. But when you think about philanthropy, it literally means love of humankind. It's love. Philanthropy is about love. So I want you to think about this as a strategy to show your love and to facilitate your donors' love, because fundraising is just servant to philanthropy. It's not an end in itself. So I'm sure that James has a lot of thoughts. I have thoughts about how you can use texting, not just to acquire new donors, not just to bring in money, but to actually facilitate philanthropy, show love, build the connection between your donors, and maybe retain and upgrade them. Because we know the Fundraising Effectiveness Project has been following donor retention, I think, since 2006, and we are losing 81% of the newly acquired donors.
Yep.
So that's just terrible.
Yeah.
And the number one reason people say they stop giving to a nonprofit is the way we communicate with them and the donor service that we provide to them.
Yeah. Well, and that's right. And when it comes to capturing new donors, the challenge that we have as marketers, Claire, is that attention spans are short. Some studies show as low as 8 seconds, but 10 to 15 minutes, on average. So just think about the amount of time it takes. And so you mentioned how we communicate with our friends and our family. And I know there's some comments, and we'll get to those in a minute, around Facebook Messenger and some of the different tactics. So what I want to do at this point is we jump into some of the different, we'll talk about strategies and some of the tactics here in a minute, but I want to lay the foundation to some of the challenges we're facing as marketers, because attention spans are short. We're competing for their time and money. And as Claire said, if we take it from a fundraising perspective, it's just about money, then it can be very, it can be very challenging to get motivated. We know we need money. Money creates the time and space to live out our vision and our values as a nonprofit. To really be on mission, it takes money. We have to fill the coffers, right? But if we're going to do that from a perspective of marketing, like what tools are at our disposal we can really get in front of our people? So here's some recent statistics. And in fact, Claire, I wanted to update something that since you and I even talked, we went back and looked at the average donations from the end of 2020 through current day, and we're up to $135 an average donation now, up from $112. So as we talk about ways to actually get in front of donors the first time and capture that initial gift, the average is $135 now, which is pretty substantial. We're not talking $5 or $10 or $15 like back in the text to give days. So these are pretty significant numbers. So whatever you're using, be it Messenger, email, texting, one of the things you should be looking is the average donation for that channel, and definitely be measuring that. But I think everybody can relate to the first number. 39% of people have more than 100 unread emails in their inbox. I'm one of the 20%, Claire. I'm kind of embarrassed to say I've got a lot of emails in my inbox.
Me too.
It's crazy. So I'm always feeling like I'm missing something, and it's constant pressure to get back in there. So 98% of text messages get open, most in just a few minutes. You've seen some of these numbers before. But what you may not know is that nonprofits that use mobile messaging reach 5 times as many potential supporters than their email using counterparts. And by the way, I still use email. I mean, I love email. I wouldn't send a text without also send an email. And we'll talk about the omni-channel or multi-channel approach here in a minute. So, so I'll just ask, and I didn't put this in a poll, but just something for you to sit on, kind of think through as we start here in the strategies. But what would a highly engaged list of ideal donors do for your cause? If you could just imagine a world in which you have, and that could be 10 people, it could be 100, it could be 1,000. But Claire, I don't know. I'm kind of looking at some of the questions that you and I put together here, but what are some of the challenges around building that highly engaged? I know we talked about, donor retention. I know you're really big on donor retention, which I absolutely love. But what are some of the challenges you find around donor retention now that we're doing or not doing well?
Well, I think some of the common challenges, the biggest one is not prioritizing donor retention, and somehow just thinking that once we've got people in, they'll continue giving to us no matter what we do. And then working with your boss or working with your board who say, don't bother people so much.
Yeah.
Don't send them another email. Don't, oh my gosh, send them a text. They might stop giving. And I would say to that, they're already stopping.
Yeah.
81% of donors go, first-time donors go away. 55% of all of your donors go away.
Yeah.
And even of your loyal donors who've given more than once already, 35% of them are going to go away. So you can't just think like if we do nothing, they're going to stay.
Yeah.
And, this, James, businesses know it's much cheaper to retain a current customer than to find a new one.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think one of the challenges for development staff, who are fundraising staff, is they don't really think that this is their job. They delegate it to the marketing staff. Oh, it's texting. We're going to give this to the marketing staff. But marketing staff don't understand donors. They don't understand donor centricity.
Yeah.
They don't understand that you're not always asking and selling, but you have to be helping.
Exactly. I love that. You've got to be helping. So yeah, absolutely. And so I think that if we reframe the mindset around fundraising to philanthropy, fundraising a means to an end, right? We're really about the love delivery business. if we reframe that we're creating value for our donors, right? We're helping them be more human, more fully awake, doing the things that humans, want to do. They want to believe in a mission that's bigger than themselves. They want to belong to it, and they want to obviously benefit and ultimately bless others. So we can talk more about some of those. But Claire, you mentioned a lot of really, really powerful numbers. I just want to mention real quick at the very end, I'm going to throw up a QR code where people can scan it and get an infographic. And I'll follow up with some of the numbers, Claire, if it's okay that you're sharing as well, because I want people to think about the bigger side of the conversation here, not just specifically to texting or mobile messaging. But we have over 9 statistics around just text messaging. And one of those numbers, which might surprise people, is the global opt-out rates for SMS. We track opt-out rates within our platform, and we can kind of raise an alert to your organization if you're giving, and we'll tell you some benchmarks, whether you're using Rally or not, that you should look for. But it might surprise people to learn that SMS is actually opted out way less than email. And partly that's in how we build the list. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So, all right, so let's get into the webinar if you're okay with that, Claire. Any other thoughts on that? And then we'll get into the actual
Let's go.
Let's go. Okay. So number one, and I know you have a lot of opinion around this, Claire, so I'd love for you to interrupt me when you feel I need to say something more valuable, but any messaging strategy, mobile, email, carrier pigeons, whatever you're going to do, you really need to look at aligning that message, that initiative, that tactic with your overall values and your why. Like, don't do text messaging if you can't. I really wish people would not do anything unless they communicate how it fits into their vision, their missions, and their values. And this can be a simple exercise, or this can be a weekend retreat with your team. It doesn't have to be that challenging to do. With a coach like Claire and some coaching from our team, on the implementation of texting as it relates to this, we can help you think some things through. But I just want to lay the foundation first, that I don't want to just go pick a tool out of the toolbox, Claire, and say, hey, let's run around and hit people with this hammer, without first deciding, hey, should we be doing this, and kind of how does this fit our broader mission? Would you add anything to that? Clarity in our vision, connected to your mission, and then of course being true to your values. Would you say anything about that?
Well, I 100% agree. You always need to be thinking about what is your compelling, persuasive case for support.
Yeah.
People have so many things that they can give to, and I find it really useful, just in whatever you're doing, to ask yourself how you would answer the question if somebody were to say to you, why should I give to you? Tell me in a sentence.
Yeah.
What would happen if you were to cease to exist?
Exactly. I love it. Yeah. And so to that end, communicate that. And to the degree that you're able to communicate that and bring that messaging into alignment, then, obviously you can move people forward. And part of that, Claire, comes down to knowing your audience, right? So we've talked about from the organizational perspective of making sure our tactics and our messaging match what we're doing. So on the previous slide, I talked, just the example was, don't do one-way marketing, SMS blast, or give. Think about the cause and the people behind your mission. Like, why do you do what you do? And then tell that story, and then see SMS potentially as another means to deliver that story and to invite people to participate in that story, much like you were at email. But if our website simply looked like, maybe a dashboard, or a NASCAR, right? A bunch of stickers on it. Like the website, you go to the website and it's just confusing. Like, what's going on with this organization? It's all over the place. There's like all these different, tiles on the website that are trying to get my time and attention. Like, what's my main primary initiative? What's my main fundraising goal? What am I trying to accomplish? Like, the simpler we can make it for people to understand exactly what we're doing as an organization, and how the efforts of what we're accomplishing through our different initiatives are accomplishing that objective, and then inviting them to participate where it makes the most sense. So, as a donor, for me to get involved, you really need to understand my motivations. And you could do this really at all levels, be it, major gifts down to, the smaller gifts, but just putting people in buckets to say, hey, let's build some basic donor personas. And we have a tool that we can provide. I know there's a lot of resources online about this, but really just getting to the motivations of our donors and understanding the audience. And I say that in the context of texting, because, if you send text messages to really any demographic, they're going to respond. I text my grandma and she's in her 80s. So I don't think age is necessarily, only the young people are texting. We all text. But the question is, you might communicate with your larger donors differently than you do your smaller donors, or you certainly may communicate differently based on some of the motivations. So We can move on from this slide, but this is number 2, just knowing your audience. Do you have anything to add to that, Claire, as I hit the advance button here?
I would add that even more important than the persona, which is the way that marketing has traditionally lumped people into Wanda Widow and Busby businessman, whatever, is how they identify their identity. How do they identify with your cause?
I love it.
The simplest thing is there's cat people, there's dog people. You don't want to send a text or an email or whatever that's all about dogs to the cat person. They're going to feel like, I always give for cats. How are they not noticing this? So one of the things is to just really notice and have a way to capture how people engage with you, what articles they read, what things they share, what things they earmark their giving for.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. I love that, the building from donor persona to how they identify. That's fantastic. That's a good advice. Very, very good. Okay. Moving on, stay human. I don't know, Claire, sometimes we forget this, but we're dealing with people on the other side of that message, aren't we?
Yes.
So we want conversations to be relevant and personal. So SMS, again, I already mentioned, don't blast, but send messages from a regular phone number or sending it from an individual, reaching out and communicating in a more of a personal way. And you can certainly do this in smaller batches and even in larger batches, but definitely at all costs avoid being transactional or robotic. We definitely want to look at ways to, even on a much smaller scale, if necessary, to build out the strategy. We want to be very, very personalized and reach out and touch people in a personal way. People will react differently if they think they're getting a text message from a person that's targeted to their specific needs or interest or identity than simply just getting another blast that says stop, unsubscribe at the very end. Like that you're just basically asking people to unsubscribe if the conversation looks like it was just a marketing blast. So, and there's some different things that we can talk about here, but anything on being human, Claire? I think we both like being human. So that's important.
Yeah, I think being human, being authentic, being genuine, and not being super formal and dry.
Yeah.
Just communicating like you would communicate in a text to your friend. And you wouldn't use a bunch of formal corporate language or jargon or, initials. I mean, we tend to be kind of sweet and clever when we send text. And I think you can still do that as a nonprofit. You want to basically delight people. You don't want them to think, oh, this is annoying and intrusive. You want them to think, wow, this is really nice. It's kind of like, I always say, if you want gifts, you must give gifts. And so that's why I have a book on my website. It's 72 creative ways to thank your donors. And I think you can adapt a lot of those to ways that you can communicate with donors via text. And a lot of it is thanking.
Yeah. I love it. And gratitude. And Dell just said, best advice I ever got, pretend it's your messaging to your grandma, which is true. I mean, when I talk to my grandma, I have one of gratitude and very humble, very grateful for her and the service and the work that she's done and the wisdom that I get. So I think, just thinking about your, like the audience as people. The fourth strategy around, so we talked about obviously, aligning with your vision and mission, kind of your values, right? The importance of that. We talked about the importance of obviously staying human, being clear on objectives. Well, let's talk about reducing the friction to act and give. Now, it did look like some of the folks in our audience, about 15% or so, said they use texting from time to time for like text to donate. So most people are familiar with the idea of using text messaging to begin that initial touch with your nonprofit, which is fantastic. And we have a number of organizations we work with to do that. But to do that well, we definitely want to make sure your website, at least the giving pages, are mobile friendly. Now, Rally, as an example, doesn't provide giving pages as part of our texting solution. We interface with everybody else's. So we can point you in some direction to give you some recommendations and do a quick little audit for your website if you'd like. But you definitely want to make sure that your website is mobile friendly. 51% of donations now to every organization that are online are coming from mobile. So 51% of your mobile donations are coming from actually the iPhone or Android now. So you definitely want to consider that. And then simple call to actions like QR codes or text to donate numbers are a very simple way to get people to engage. At the end of this presentation, in fact, I'm going to bring up a QR code and allow you to grab it with your camera. But they're making a big comeback now with COVID and restaurants putting their menus online. So you'll see more and more of these QR codes. It's older school tech, Claire, but it's actually making a comeback. But very, very simple ways to get people to actually engage. We want to make it simple for people to get on board with our cause, and texting is a great way to do that. Anything on reducing the friction to acquire, and then we'll move to number 5.
No, I think that's great advice. And I am also seeing the comeback of QR codes. I'm on the board of a nonprofit theater company, and we've been doing Zoom streaming shows. And at the end of the show, there's always a QR code, and we're bringing in a lot of money just that way.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, sometimes I'm absolutely, I saw an ad. I actually took a screenshot of it today with my team, but I saw an ad come up on my Google. I was out searching for something, and it was actually a nonprofit asking for reoccurring donations, which I thought was fantastic. But when I went and I didn't click on the ad, I didn't want to charge them for the click. So I went and found the URL and kind of looked at their website and hunted around. And it was amazing that you were driving people to a website, but the page wasn't really that simple. Like, I still had 12 boxes to fill out. So we definitely want to think about simplicity. We don't want our donors to think about how to sign up and opt in for that first time. And then, Claire, you mentioned this already, but we couldn't have a list of 7 without putting gratitude in there. We just have to consider this is about philanthropy. It's about inviting people to participate, and we operate from a place of gratitude, loving kindness, way more effectively than from a place of scarcity and just donations for cash and money. So encouraging conversations. What does this look like? And from my experience, Claire, it's less about how much is too much texting. We have organizations of all sizes that raise this flag at some point, like how much is too much when it comes to asking for money. And the answer comes down to how regular is your communications around your initiatives? How much value are you creating for your donors? Do they feel like they're part of your cause when it's not just about money? And how are you communicating with them? But even just texting ahead of a thank you call, even if you just do it once or twice a year around texting folks to thank them for their participation in an event, consider texting them before you call them, and make sure the texting solution also supports phone calls, because we definitely want to make sure we get voices on the phone in some cases, especially with some of your bigger donors. And then share updates and stories, invite them into the conversation. But I'm going to stop here because I know you probably have a lot on gratitude around the power of gratitude, Claire.
Sure. I mean, I think, they say you have to see something in advertising like 7 times. I'm sure it's more, before you notice it. So you don't want to be just only using texting for fundraising. You want to mix in, 7 messages that are like gratitude type of messages that make people feel good. And, I think if somebody were to have told me early on in my career, listen more, be nicer, be grateful, show gratitude, that would have been tremendously helpful to me.
I love it.
And it really makes me think of that Maya Angelou quote. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So a text that says, I heard a lot of cats meowing about the perfect home you found for them. Wanted you to hear them too. Thank you. Like, no one's going to think like, oh, I wish they hadn't sent me that. It's not intrusive. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And include an emoji of a cat while you're at it. And I saw a couple of questions coming about when to text. And so I'm going to make sure we get the Q&A at the end. So keep those questions coming. And we will get through them, but that's some great feedback, Claire, on that as well. So yeah. And when it comes to messaging, one of the things that we just need to make sure we're doing is define success. It's amazing how many times, and myself included, I set out with an initiative and I never sat down with my team and write out a simple sentence that says, success will look like this. This is what success will look like. So let's just define that up front. And let's be clear. It could be starting a conversation with a donor. And so you might end the text with a question mark. Can we expect to see you this year? Or do you think you can make it? Or hi, Jane, how are you today? Any questions that end in a text are going to more likely elicit a response or a reply than if I just simply say a fact or a statistic and then, stop to stop, help to help kind of a thing, right? So the way we format the messaging, the way we send the messaging, whether they're using conversational components like the one-to-one texting which you hear a lot about now around some of the new strategies to engage people through texting, or whether it's one-way marketing blasts. So there's just different types of text messages. And we definitely want to think about, are we trying to start a conversation? Are we moving people to an email newsletter? Believe it or not, Claire, we see a lot of people successfully using text messaging to grow their email list because it is an omni-channel, multi-channel approach. And if it's me, I want them on my email, I want them on my SMS, I want them in my Facebook, right? I want them, I want every way I can get a hold of them, because it's going to take multiple touches across multiple channels, and I will use one channel to build the next. I'll post in social to get them to opt into text, and then I'll send text to get them to opt into email, and vice versa. So really it's about defining and measuring success and think about ways to accomplish that. Anything to add on that? And I'll move on to the last point here, Claire.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're talking about again is making a persuasive case to opt in to receive text messages. And I think there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And I think one of the best ways is to trigger FOMO, fear of missing out. And we know that fear of loss weighs heavier than hope of gain. There's been a lot of behavioral economics research done on this, and you can use it to your advantage. So, you know, before an event, I would ask people to opt in so they get timely updates. You know, maybe they'll get an alert that new auction items have been added for bidding, and they're the first ones who find out, or new speakers or new entertainers are added, or, you know, or if they're at the event, certain things are happening. They've been outbid, you know, program's about to begin. Maybe they can, the chat box is now open so you can communicate with other people, or at a volunteer activity. I used to work at the food bank, and those slots were like coveted. They filled up. So while you're at the activity, packing foods, get out your phone, opt in to receive, you know, and be the first to learn about the popular activities that are coming up that fill up quickly. And the same thing like advocacy. Advocacy is a great reason to use text. And so you're saying, decide what you want the action response to be. I want them to sign a petition. You know, I want them to call their congressperson. So then ask them to opt in so that they receive breaking news about what happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, register your kids for the camp. We have a lot of workflows like that, and then we'll alert you if there's any, you know, closures due to fire, or, you know, any emergencies, or text to get a playlist for the upcoming, you know, run or walkathon. Text to sign up, or, you know, to have real-time traffic and parking information loaded to your phone. If you're on your way to an event and you get lost, or you twist your ankle or something, you know, text our team. We're listening, we're standing by. Again, the difference is with the texting tool, if there's a human on the other end and they know they can get a hold of you, and it's about having a conversation around either the event or participation in future events, then you're much more likely to start a conversation. Again, this is really no different than passing out your cell phone so people can call you if they have a question or a problem, or if they want to you know, get it more involved in your cause. The difference is you can have your team, of course, monitor that inbox, and you can send the messages to different places and prioritize and tag and do that kind of thing. So, but absolutely great points that you've written. And then this is Claire, very important. There's no one size fits all, you know, done and dusted. It really is about A/B testing, isn't it? Wash, rinse, and repeat. We can segment the list different ways and see what works. We can do smaller batches. It is a process. It's not a one and done. And just like anything, just like email marketing, just like, you know, that when you first started doing your in-person events, it was really about starting and then learning what works and what doesn't, and then, you know, what worked well, what can we improve, and then continue. We can, of course, provide you with benchmarks. At the end, you'll get that infographic, but you can look at benchmarks of what opt-out rates are that are, you know, commonly, you know, available to you around like email and text messaging. And then you can see what your opt-out rates are. And then we can talk about ways and strategies to curve that and make that, you know, obviously more effective for you. So last slide, Claire, is 7, you know, A/B test. It's not done with one. It takes a process. Anything to add there?
Well, I think A/B tests are great. If you want to go to a website that has the examples of hundreds of A/B tests, go over to Next After.
Yeah.
And they share the A/B tests they've done with all of their clients. And so if you haven't done it, you might be able to see what they did. It's a really great thing, because I know a lot of nonprofits feel like they don't have the bandwidth for this, or they do it, but they don't really track the results.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm a measurement. I'm a data guy. I love insights. So everything we do. And this is, true for companies of all sizes and organizations of all sizes, nonprofits too. But the more we can define success on the onset, identify what success looks like, the better we are at really getting these things, worked out over time. So I want to let everybody know that if you sign up for the webinar today, you will get a new implementation checklist we're putting together. Again, I've designed the implementation checklist. You don't have to use Rally. I'm not here to sell you Rally. Of course, I'd love to work with you, and we'll give you a special offer here at the end. But just want you to use text messaging as a means to communicate with your donors. And I'm giving you an implementation checklist that you can use to consider text messaging for to engage your audience, of course. If you sign up for the Rally platform, you're going to get a year of the clarification school on us for free. So we are going to give everybody that signs up this month, actually next month, it's already end of August. So through September, if you sign up with the Rally platform, and I'll send anybody that's interested in that a link to do that. But we're more than happy to have you, Claire, help folks. And here is why it's so important. And we'll talk about the raffle here in a minute. When it comes to books and software, the two things that they have in common is I can give you a book or I can give you software, but until you implement it and understand it, there's no value. So it's software plus implementation equals success. It's book plus reading, right? And internalizing that learning and applying that learning equals success. So we provide the software and the platform around mobile messaging. Claire provides the implementation and the coaching for everything else. If you're not familiar with the Clarification School, I would really encourage you to go check it out. I'll send a link out here shortly. Actually, Will, if you're online, if you could post a link, that would be outstanding to everybody in the chat to the Clarification School. But I would really highly recommend that you look into the Clarification School. Claire isn't paying me to say this. I'm a member and I pay out of my own pocket to be a member, Claire. Find it very valuable. And I use it for when it says, okay, we're going to create a text messaging solution around thank you programs. What does Claire say about gratitude? What do the statistics show? How can I present it to my board? How do I take it back to my team? How do I build and name a gratitude or a donor thank you program? Oh, and now how do I insert texting into that? And that's obviously where we come in. But we're giving away a 1 year full membership for free in the Clarification School. So when you connected today, it showed that you were here. So we're going to use a randomizer to grab a number, and we'll share that with you through email who the winner is. For the Clarification School, but big believers in implementation and software, not just software. Claire, would you add anything to that in conclusion here? I know we're ahead of time, but I want to go through questions, but anything that before we jump into Q&A?
I guess what I was thinking as you were saying that is that you always want to be thinking from the perspective of the recipient of your communication. So I always ask myself before I, hit send or print, what is this person going to think when they get this? What are they going to feel? What are they going to do? And if it's not what your original intention was, then you really should go back to the drawing board. And speaking about A/B tests, you can do internal tests too. It's a really good idea to take this around to other people, particularly outside of your nonprofit, people who don't, live and breathe it every day. And one of the things that I think about texting, it's a tool. All of these things are tools, and they're tools that you're hoping are going to facilitate philanthropy ultimately. And one of the things about texts is I sort of break them down into 3 buckets. There's necessary tests, like this is an emergency, like we have to let people know. There's friendly, helpful texts, which is, the thank you text, or like, here's a video of something that we just had to share with you, or, we just hit our matching goal and you helped us, woohoo. Those are friendly and helpful. And then there's unnecessary text. And so you always want to ask yourself, is this the best way to communicate with this donor? And if it is, proceed. And if it's not, use a different medium.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah,
So
and
in a crisis is a great time to use texting. People appreciate the need for timely responses. Also, if you've got an urgent need for them to contact their congressperson or something like that. And just, you just make sure that whatever you're doing, you use accepted best practices.
Yeah,
So
I love
that's
it.
why I say have them opt in, make it really easy for them to opt out. Periodically remind them how they can opt out. If you're sensitive to donor needs this way, you're likely to keep them. Even if they decide to drop off your texting list, they won't get so frustrated that they leave you entirely.
I love it. Claire, that's such a good reminder. Now I'm a simple guy, so I have to come up with ways to remember this easily. So I always say head, heart, and hands. Like, how do we want people to think? How do we want people to feel? What do we want people to do? And then when I send the message or when I go to do whatever it is that I'm doing, be email, texting, I always think, okay, does this bring us closer to our thinking, our feeling, and our doing? Is this in alignment with that? Now, just a quick Claire, I shared this with you, but I want to just share it with our audience. Rally actually got its name originally. We were sitting around as a team. We had just sold another business around websites, engaging people through big events, had served thousands of organizations driving activities online. And we thought, man, the next problem we want to solve is how do I get people to take action again and again and again? How do I rally them around a cause? And it's funny, it actually took us a year to land on text messaging. I don't know if you know that, Claire, but I was resistant to it for a good year as our team whiteboarded as to what we were actually going to build. But the name came out of a book we were all reading at the time. It's a book called Lean Brand. It's actually a friend, Jeremiah, that wrote it. Great book for keeping marketing, iterating very quickly on marketing and kind of thinking through your market. And there was a particular point in that book where I read, it's page 107, I'll never forget, but it clearly said, like the more in alignment you can bring your messaging and your product value delivery to your customers' felt needs and wants, like the more connected those two are, the more magical it is. And in fact, the author calls that the rally point. And I remember I put the book down and I went back to the office. I was sneaking away from the office at a coffee shop or something at the time, but I went back to the office and I told the team, hey, this is the name of the company. It's Rally. We had another name at the time we were thinking about, but I said, it has to have the word rally because we want to rally people around that rally point. And so let's find a communications channel that is most immediate, most personal, that we can take people and understand their felt needs and wants and do the efforts that we're doing anyway as philanthropists. But let's make sure we're connecting that to our cause and to our mission and bringing that into alignment. And then, of course, the rest is history. When we decided it had to be immediate, clearly texting became the answer to that, the kind of the how that would happen. So that's a little bit about our story. But when you said head, heart, and hands, or thinking, feeling, doing, that's very, very, very much in alignment with my belief at Rally. Whether you use Rally or not is I just want you to be thinking in that way. So outstanding and very helpful. Up on the screen is 9 must-know text messages for your nonprofit. So if you're not familiar with how QR codes work, there's actually a swipe down in iPhone, for example, that actually has a little QR symbol. You can actually put that up in front of the screen and it will just automatically take you to the website, or you can just hover over it with a camera app of your choosing and then click the link and that'll take you to the website. And that'll redirect you to the ability to download the 9 must-know text messaging sets for nonprofits. I'm using this as a foundation, Claire, so people can have that kind of, okay, let's talk more about texting as a particular tool. If you download that, I will also send you any additional stats that we put together with Claire. I'll know you were in this webinar, so I'll make sure you get that as well. And then we're putting together a checklist and I'll send that to you as well through email. So I just want everybody to get as much as I can give you, be it statistics or how to, like implementation. And then we're available, of course, to answer any questions. If you want to engage with Rally, you're welcome to do that. I'm James at rallycorp.com. Or you can text Rally to 24365 and choose option number 2. But really, I just want to make sure you get these things in your hands and that we're available to you. Now, Claire, anything else that you want to close out with? And I'm going to turn to some questions here.
Let's go to the questions.
Let's go to the questions. Okay. So let's see here. I'm going to scroll back to the top. Give me just 1 second. Perfect. All right. So looks like we have a question on compliance and when you can text. And so somebody actually answered that and they're absolutely right. As long as it's your data, your donors, then completely okay to text them. Again, my disclaimer is I'm not an attorney and I don't pretend to be one on TV. So it is a little unique on case-to-case basis on how you came up with the list in the first place. But if you do have a list of donors and it's reasonably expected that you communicate with your donors through, end of year emails, that type of thing, then certainly texting is okay. Now, if you have an older aging list, let's say people donated 4 years ago, I don't know that I would just start blasting with text messages. I think there's a way to warm up that list, just like you would warm up an email on a domain. So we can talk a little bit more about that. I actually have a separate webinar just on compliance, and we can take that to that conversation there. But I would highly suggest that you not buy lists. We're not buying lists. So I wouldn't do that for email either. So you're looking to do highly engaged folks. We recommend that you use QR codes and short codes and all these different things that'll be in the checklist that you'll see to engage an audience you already have. So you get people on social media to opt in to receive text messages, to take that first step. The better option is always to have people text you first. That gets everybody happy if they're actually texting you first instead of them just getting a text message out of the blue. But we can certainly talk more about that in a strategy session. But I don't know, Claire, if that answers the question or if I gave too much data. But you can text, don't buy lists. We can talk about how to build your list from a couple of different methods. Anything that you would add to that, Claire? That's kind of more in my department.
No, I think that when you said the best option is always to have people text you first, that gets back to having them opt in.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like you have them opt in to get to your email list. Right.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Yeah. So 100%. So somebody asked about Facebook Messenger. So there's WhatsApp, there's WeChat, there's Facebook Messenger. There's a lot of what's called over the top or over the top networks, OTN, over the top network. Did I say that right? And there's a whole new standard coming out around RCS. I won't get too technical here, but the carriers like Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile have done a tremendous amount of work delivering messages. So I do recommend using things like Facebook Messenger and WeChat and WhatsApp and all that. There's a great place, especially with international audiences, where that works perfectly good. We can take that conversation offline and talk more about it in detail, but definitely encourage that. At the end of the day, you're going to reach a lot more people with SMS because Facebook, I don't know about your Facebook, but it's becoming much like my inbox. I ignore it half the time. In fact, I unsubscribe from push notifications because I just can't handle the constant feed of Facebook. And there's just an audience of people that will not engage on Facebook. So just like anything, I would recommend if you're going to do something like Facebook Messenger, that you're defining success, you're tracking success. If you're getting $135 in average donations on Facebook and 98% open rate, keep it up. Don't do SMS. If you're not, you may want to consider SMS as an alternative. Somebody mentioned another product for texting. It does take time. It looks like it's been about a year. So let's see the question here, Claire. I'm sorry, I'm reading as we go here. Do we need to be texting from instead of just directing them to text? Yeah, absolutely. So text to donate, with what most systems do, allow you to text in to get a code or a link to donate. That's perfect. That's a good first step for acquiring donor phone numbers. What we're advocating is you go a step further and that you actually text people through the platform as well. So you engage people. And we actually do that on regular telephone numbers or on a toll-free phone number. And we support voicemail and telephone calls and all that, of course. So Rally is a full mobile messaging solution. So we're looking at driving engagement around mobile messaging, not just inbound text only. Inbound text only are great for certain implementations, but to drive reoccurring donations and engagement, you really need to look at two-way conversation. Any other questions here? Let's see here. Virtual happy hour on a Zoom or on SMS. Absolutely. I do virtual happy hours with a couple of nonprofits that we're part of. There's a giving button now, Claire. I don't know if you know this, but Zoom just rolled out the donate link or the donate button.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so it's very, very handy to do that. And I highly suggest that people take advantage of that. So if you're using Zoom webinars or Zoom, there's a way to enable the donate button. I still use QR codes though, in addition to that, because I still want their cell phone. I can direct you to a landing page, but until I get your phone number, we don't have a texting conversation. So it's really hard for me to get you back again if it's just email. Emails have, I don't know, Claire, if you've seen the latest statistics on this, but do you know what your latest email open rates are with nonprofits? Is around 20 to 25%?
Oh, no, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've seen studies all over the place. I think the most recent one I saw was 24%, 2% conversion, $30 donation around that. But
yeah.
So I'm always telling people, look, you can take people to a web page, get their email, but then good luck getting them back again. So we need to look at ways to do that. Looks like somebody said they don't text their grandma. Jody, you got to text your grandma. Come on. I'm just teasing. Yeah.
Not
You're
all
right.
grandmas are created equal.
That's right. You know what? And if your donors are not, and a quick way to know if your donors are going to text, to your point, Claire, have them text you first. And if they don't, or they don't opt in, that's perfectly fine. A percentage of your donors will not, or supporters will not want to text, and that's absolutely okay. The most recent statistic I saw was that 8 in 10 prefer texting over telephone calls, 6 in 10 prefer it over email, but it's not for everybody. So you will have a percentage of people that that don't do that. All right, last question here, I think, and then I can put all of these into an email and follow up if anybody left. So I'm working through them backwards. I wish I had Will. I should bring Will online to kind of work through this with me.
Well, I see one that I would like the answer to,
Yeah,
which
please.
is, do people really want their text inbox as full as their email inbox?
Yeah,
Curious
good
if
question.
that's where tests are leading as per
Yeah.
historical trends.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Would you like me to answer that, or you want to take
Yeah,
that?
I'd like you to answer that.
Perfect. Yeah. Carriers are spending a tremendous amount of time to protect us from that. In fact, there's a whole, I don't know if you're familiar with 10 DLC, but do yourself a favor and don't Google it. But 10 DLC is an incredible rollout by the carriers to standardize text messaging from regular phone numbers. There's already a significant hoops you have to jump through to register what's called a short code. So in my case, 24365 is my short code. You can see it up on the screen. We spend a lot of money and a lot of compliance, and we have, audits consistently to make sure we can stay compliant on 24365 because they don't want to have us spamming people, of course. So we spend a lot of time looking at the network traffic on Rally to make sure that we're not sending spam, cadence messages, quality, click through, all that. So as long as the metrics are there to kind of lay that foundation as an organization, you're fine. Truth is, because of the nature of texting, because it is so effective, as it is today, it's impossible to not have your message land. That's why 90, 95, 98%, you've seen different numbers, are your open rates. So definitely want to look at messaging as a means to communicate, as Claire said, more of your organization's values and why you exist and how you engage people on their terms. But frankly, there is a group of people out there that won't engage with you on email. Like, they just won't. My son, Claire, actually just asked me yesterday, I was, give him a hard time because I had sent him an email over the weekend. He hadn't replied. And I just was teasing. I said, Jameson, do you know how to reply to an email? And he's 13. He said, well, if I reply, doesn't it go back to everybody? Like, he didn't know how reply worked. And I had to show him how reply versus reply all. And it was just like, wow, that's, and I'm not saying the 13-year-olds are our donors per se, but there's a generation growing up that just don't email and just don't know how it works. And they have no interest in learning. And, for what it's worth, my 16-year-old doesn't email much either. So there's definitely a generation coming, and already here, where it's just texting, and they expect to hear from an organization that they're passionate about. They also want to be able to opt out. So that, I wouldn't concern yourself too much with that, but absolutely great point. I hope that answers, did that answer the question, you think, Claire? Or was that just a new sermon? Okay, good.
I think so.
Good. So somebody asked about story length. Character count does matter. Some texting solutions limit to 160 characters. Some do much more than that. So consider that. That'll be in the checklist to think through, and then send videos as a way to kind of share more information. I don't know if any other questions or anything else as we close up here. Claire, any closing thoughts? I'm going to let you end us here. We're right at time.
Oh,
so
no.
There's so much.
Gosh, I guess the one other thing that if somebody had told me this early on, it would have been really helpful to me, which is that you work for the donor and the community, not the organization. People give through you, not to you.
Oh man, that's amazing.
So your job is to make it as easy and as joyful as possible for them to express their passions. And with some people, the easiest and the most joyful way is through texting. So again, I'd go back to that, listen more, pay attention and act accordingly. And for some of you, you're going to find that text messaging is great. It totally meets the needs of your constituency. It really is the best way to communicate with them. If all of your donors are that person's grandma who doesn't like texting, then probably not so much. You'll use something else.
Yeah. And that's a great word, Claire. I love it. I get chills when you talk. So I absolutely love it. But you're absolutely right. We're creating we're facilitating how people communicate. That's the strength of the bond with your donors that matters, right? It's how they think, how they feel, how they act, and how you persuade them in that mission. So absolutely love that. If you do select a text messaging provider, make sure they don't lock you into a long-term contract. You definitely want to think about, running a 90-day test pilot or something like that. Most of them ought to give you those kinds of terms and help you. And as I mentioned earlier, and the reason I'm a big believer in the clarification school, and Claire, I hope it's okay if I brag on you, but it takes coaching, it takes training, it takes know-how, and you could take someone like Claire, who is great at reading and understanding and internalizing all this great insight, and she distills it down into some very actionable, clear steps and provides some coaching and training around that. Or you can go out and learn the hard way and spend 30, 40 years of your own career and come to some of the same conclusions. So I'm always a believer in shortening that path as much as I can. And when it comes to texting, that's really why Rally exists solely for nonprofits, is we want to help nonprofits think about how to use texting to engage and retain donors. That's our purpose. That's our mission. That's why I exist as a company. So, you can kind of go piece it together with other tools and try to figure it out, or you can come to our team. And again, making a plug for Rally here, but would love to help you think this stuff through. And if at the end of the day, Rally's not a good fit or texting isn't a great fit, we still want to encourage you, because at the end of the day, my job is to encourage new ways for communications and ways to engage your audience. So I hope to be able to do that with you. But that's a wrap for now. Feel free to reach out if there's anything else we can do to help you out. Claire, thank you for your time as always. Such
Thank
a
you,
delight.
James.
Yeah, I appreciate you. All right, everybody. Thank you. Watch for that email for the checklist, and we will announce the raffle winner. I think we could do that, Claire, by end of day. Would you be okay with that? We'll just
Sure.
run it through the randomizer and send it out. Okay. Very good. Thanks, everybody.